Welcome to a walking tour of the Stone Street Cemetery in Forest Lake Township, Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania. This video has been prepared for the 118th Stone Family Reunion held in 2023. If you are a member of the Stone Family Reunion, you are related to each of the 108 burials in this cemetery. As we approach the gate from the Stone Street side, we notice that just to the right of the gate is a section of the fence that can be taken down easily, and that was originally meant to admit carriages. And right up through the center of the cemetery from the east side to the west side is an open area that is a carriageway, and it's intended for both visitors to be able to come and visit the graves, but also to bring remains for burial. As we walk through the cemetery, we notice that the cemetery, originally called a graveyard, is very well maintained. We can see that many of the gravestones have been repaired and erected, and some have been placed in a concrete encasement. As we walk a little bit to the west, we note a very old and unusual gravestone for Philo Bostwick. Philo was married to Charlotte Stone. The Bostwicks lived at the south end of Stone Street, and for many years he was the town justice for Middletown, and there were many town meetings held at his home. If we read the inscription on the stone, we see that he suffered a tragic ending. The inscription on his stone reads, "Philo Bostwick, Esquire, who was killed by the fall of a tree on the 9th of July, 1834, in the 51st year of his age."
The next gravestone indicates another family tragedy. The two young sons of Calvin Luther Leet and his wife Arabella Stone died in 1863, just 5 days apart. The symbols on the stone are a hand pointing skyward that confirms the belief in life after death, and the dove that shows as a messenger of God carrying the soul to heaven. Buried next to them is their father, Calvin Leet, who served in the Civil War and was away at war when they died. Note the flag next to the gravestone recognizing his service.
As we walk along the northern fence line of the Stone Street Cemetery, we note that the Handrick Annex of the Birchardville Cemetery is adjacent. Among the many veterans' graves at the cemetery, we note the graves of Calvin Cobb and Phoebe Stone. Calvin and Phoebe were the original settlers on Cobb Hill, which is right behind the Birchardville Church. There are many Cobb descendants in the Stone Street Cemetery.
We believe these two infant daughters of Judson and Polly Stone are the first burials in the cemetery, about 1817. The most prominent gravestones in the cemetery are those of Judson and Polly Turrell Stone, who donated the land for the cemetery. Their monuments, resembling the Washington Monument, are marble obelisks pointing to the sky with matching footstones. Judson and Polly are the ancestors of many Stone Reunion members. When possible, early graveyard burials were made with heads to the west and feet to the east, so the interred was facing the rising sun. And this is the case at Stone Street. Judson and Polly's grave markers each display a marble picture frame that would have included their photograph. Judson was opposed to war, tobacco, and alcohol, and operated a tannery on Stone Street, as well as a retail store in Friendsville. Polly is noted for having stood guard with a big stick at their henhouse door. She was to prevent a marauding panther from entering and killing their chickens, while Judson went to get his gun.
Judson and Polly had 7 daughters that lived to adulthood, and 6 of those married and brought in 6 new surnames to the family. The surnames were Bradshaw, Hendrick, Hosford, Dayton, Johnson, and Butterfield. We see several of these surnames as we walk further into the cemetery. As we walk to the northwestern section of the cemetery, we know that there are more modern burials, and we see granite markers. Several of these are Hendricks, and in particular we note the gravestone for our longtime Stone Reunion historian, Dr. G. Richard Hendrick, and his wife Fanny. Now we'll cross the carriageway and go back to the front of the cemetery and walk up the south side. Among several Hendrick family graves, our attention is drawn to a Revolutionary War soldier, one of 2 in the cemetery. This gravestone is for Andrew Hendrick and his wife Elizabeth Gaylord. The inscription on the stone reads, "A soldier of the Revolutionary War who died October 15th, 1819, age 67. That means that Andrew Hendrick was one of the earliest burials in Stone Street Cemetery.
As we walk through the cemetery, I hope you'll keep your eye open for a particular type of carving on gravestones, and it's a weeping willow. It was particularly popular in the 1840s to 1850s.
As we walk further back into the south side of the cemetery, we note the gravestones of Garrett and Nancy Stone. Garrett was the oldest of the Stone brothers and was the first of the Stones to settle on Stone Street. Garrett and his wife lived across the street from the cemetery, approximately where Lance and Renee Birchard now live.
Russell Sheldon's gravestone is a beautiful example of the weeping willow. The image is meant to portray the family's sadness at their loss.
We now approach the gravestone of another Revolutionary War soldier. This gravestone is for Peleg Baldwin and his wife, Anna Turrell.
The Baldwins lived on a very small part of the farm, now owned by Denny and Sheila Birchard. Peleg enlisted in the Revolutionary War when he was a young teenager and served as a drummer boy. Not only did drummer boys beat the drums for marching, but they took care of camp, relieving the soldiers for other duties. They cooked, they washed dishes, they set up tents.
In the same area, we see the gravestone for Canfield Stone Jr., who died as a young man. This Canfield was the younger brother of Garrett and Judson, one of the 3 brothers that settled on Stone Street. As we move further back in the cemetery, we see the gravestone of Henry Spafford and his wife, Adeline Stone. Adeline was the granddaughter of Canfield Stone Jr.
Milton Spafford's gravestone commemorates his service in the Civil War with its flag on the top. He came to a sad ending. He survived the sinking of a ship, but took ill and came home and died.
Now we're returning to the more modern graves in the western section of the cemetery. This section of the cemetery was reopened in the 1980s and 1990s, and all of the grave sites here have been contracted for. Here we see some grave sites for Birchard descendants that lived on Stone Street. In particular, we see the grave sites of Selden and Arlene Birchard. Their family, both ancestors and descendants, have maintained the cemetery for several generations. As we complete our walking tour of the Stone Street Cemetery, we'll look at the beautiful stone fence along the southern extent and the unique wooden posts and steel rail fence along the other three sides. This fence was constructed by the Mellowish family about 120 years ago. It's a beautiful cemetery we can all be proud of. It's been protected, preserved, and maintained by family members for more than 200 years. We'll close the tour by looking at a few selected gravestones. Thanks for watching.